Hi, lovely audience. My 500 plus subscribers have been completed. I want us to increase this and grow our YouTube family, because the bigger the family will be, the more people will share their daily incidents with me, which will reach you through this platform. So why not subscribe to this channel and help grow it? I hope you won't disappoint me, that I know I can count on you. So let's start today's real story. She said it softly, like she was doing me a favor, and somehow that made it worse. I care about you, but only as a friend. And for a second, I just stared at her because my brain refused to accept what my ears had already understood. Because everything about the last year of my life said we were more than that. And everything about her tone said she had already moved on before I even realized something was wrong. Her name was Sloane Harrington. We met in a quiet wine bar in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of place where people don't raise their voices and nobody checks prices before ordering. I was there for a client meeting that ran late. She was there alone, reading something on her phone, looking like she didn't want to be approached but wouldn't be surprised if someone tried. I didn't try at first, but she looked up, caught me glancing, and smiled just enough to make it feel like permission. And that was all it took. Her world felt effortless. Her clothes, her posture, even the way she spoke, everything suggested she had never had a fight for stability. On the other hand, had built mine from scratch. I ran a consulting firm out of Stanford, and every dollar in my account had a story behind it. She told me she worked in creative partnerships, which sounded vague enough to mean anything. I didn't question it. At the time, I didn't need to. The first few weeks were easy. Dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into routines. And routines turned into expectations that neither of us ever clearly defined. She never called it a relationship, but she never denied it either. She would show up at my place on Friday evenings with a small bag, like she already belonged there. She would leave things behind, intentionally or not, until her presence became permanent even when she wasn't physically there. At some point, I stopped asking questions, because everything felt real enough. The first shift was small, so small I almost ignored it. She asked me to cover dinner one night. Not unusual. And she forgot her wallet the next time. Then she said her card had a limit issue. And then, without any formal conversation, I became the one who paid for everything. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself it was temporary, that she was just going through something, that relationships weren't always perfectly balanced. But here's the thing about imbalance. It doesn't stay small. It grows quietly. It expands into areas you didn't even realize were negotiable. Soon, it wasn't just dinners. It was weekend trips she suggested, but never contributed to. It was gifts she hinted at, but never directly asked for. It was bills she mentioned casually, knowing I would offer before she had to request. And I always did, because every time I hesitated, she would look at me with just enough vulnerability to make me feel like pulling back would be cruel. And maybe that's where I made my first real mistake. Before we go further, be honest with yourself for a second. If someone you cared about kept needing help, would you stop and question it? Or would you keep giving because it felt easier than confronting it? I kept giving, not because I was blind, but because I didn't want to see what it might mean if I stopped. Months passed, and slowly, something else started to change. Her attention. She still showed up, still stayed over, still smiled when it was convenient. But something underneath it felt thinner. Conversations became shorter. Responses became delayed. Moments that used to feel connected started to feel transactional. And then came the night everything finally surfaced. We were sitting in my living room. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to break it. She looked at me like she had already rehearsed what she was about to say. I care about you. That was the first line. Soft, controlled, safe, but only as a friend. And just like that, everything rearranged itself in my mind. All the dinners, all the weekends, all the moments I thought meant something. They didn't disappear. They just changed meaning. I leaned back, not because I was relaxed, but because I needed distance from what I was hearing. And what exactly have we been doing this whole time? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Spending time together. No apology. No acknowledgement of confusion. Just a clean, simple redefinition of reality. And that's when something inside me shifted. Not anger, not even sadness. Clarity. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to protect the version of her I had built in my head. I was looking at the version that was actually sitting in front of me. You know what's interesting? I said quietly, friends don't pay for everything. Her expression didn't change immediately, but something in her eyes flickered. That's not fair, she said. And maybe she believed that, but fairness had nothing to do with it anymore. It's not about fair, I replied. It's about what this actually is. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but strategically, like she was recalculating the situation. I never asked you to do those things. That line was precise, carefully chosen, technically true, and that's what made it so effective. But here's what she didn't say. She never stopped me either. She never corrected the dynamic when it benefited her. She never clarified the boundaries until the moment it no longer served her to keep them blurred. And that realization didn't hurt. It simplified everything. I stood up, not dramatically, just enough to signal that something had ended. You're right, I said. You didn't ask. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed her bag, and placed it near the door. But I also don't owe you anything moving forward. That's when the silence changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was final. She looked at the bag, then back at me, like she was trying to decide if this was real. Are you serious? And for the first time that night, I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. I am. Because here's the part people don't talk about. Walking away doesn't always feel powerful in the moment. Sometimes it just feels quiet, like you're choosing not to continue something that already stopped making sense a long time ago. She left without another word. And that could have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because dynamics like that don't disappear overnight. They test you. 3 days later, she texted me. It was casual, almost like nothing had happened. Hey, can you help me out with something? I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I understood what the question really meant. It wasn't about help. It was about whether the dynamic was still intact. Whether I was still the same person she could rely on without giving anything back. And that moment mattered more than the conversation we had in my living room. Because this was the real decision. So let me ask you this. If someone shows you exactly how they see you, do you accept it and adjust? Or do you try to renegotiate your value in their life? I put my phone down, and I didn't reply. Not out of anger, not out of pettiness, but because silence in that moment said everything I needed it to say. Weeks passed. Life didn't collapse. It didn't even slow down. If anything, it became clearer. I noticed things I had ignored before, time I had given without thinking. Energy I had spent trying to maintain something that was never equally held. And slowly, something replaced that space. Not another person. Perspective. Because the truth is, Sloane didn't deceive me. She revealed herself in small, consistent ways. I just chose not to interpret those signals until it became unavoidable. And maybe that's the real lesson. Not about her, but about me. About what I was willing to accept. About how easily I blur my own boundaries to keep something alive. And about how quiet the moment is when you finally decide not to do that anymore.